Speaker is Carlos Cordoba, and he'll be talking about the advantages of a scientific IDE.
5 minutes. Okay, thank you. Okay. Hi, my name is Carlos Cordoba. Come from Colombia. This is my first SciPy. And I'm going to talk to you today about the advantages of a scientific IDE and give this talk on behalf of the Spyder project. So let's start. Well, who am I? Probably most of you don't know me, but I run on GitHub under the alias @Cordoba12, and that's also my Gmail address. I have a Master in Science degree from National University of Colombia. I was a heavy user and developer of Mathematica, open source developer, weird thing, but a C++ programmer for 2 years, Python user since 2006, and Spyder contributor, active Spyder contributor since 2010. And as you probably guess, I'm going to talk to you about the Spyder IDE. So this is a very short resume of the project. On the left is our logo, and on the right is Pierre Raibaud. Pierre is the creator of a Spyder. He started the project in 2009. He almost did it all by himself, which is very impressive. He's a terrific guy. And now we have around 30,000 lines of code, so it's not a small project. And perhaps one of its most attractive features is that it's multi-platform. So because it's developed in Qt, but we also have a native Mac app, which I guess, given the number of Macs, it pleased people. And because we have a lot of complaints of Mac users before, so I had to sit down and write the Mac app. And we also have great support on Windows, because Pierre is a Windows hacker. So he developed Spyder on Windows, and he used it on Windows. And he also created 2 distributions called Python XY and WinPython, and both of them work exclusively on Windows. And finally, our next version will have support for Python 3. Currently, we don't have it, but we'll have it at the end of the summer. So why do we need a scientific IDE? So IDEs are probably one of the most hated programs by professional programmers, right? They want Emacs and a console, or Beam and a console, and that's enough for them. And that's one reason, and the other is if IPython is great. If we can run IPython, why do we need a scientific IDE? Well, yeah, IPython is great, but what is the reason that makes IPython so special? Well, we think that Python is a great way to evaluate and with the notebook now document your code. But it could be nicer if it be a bit less dependent on the command line. You know, for people that is accustomed to the command line is great, but for others, going back to the command line for configuration, to do NB convert, as the man says, it's kind of a pain now. And the other thing is that Python could be much easier to configure. Right now, you have to edit plain text files, as I'm going to show you. And also, if it be more integrated with other tools. But we also need, or I think that we also need a scientific IDE to gain wider adoption in the scientific community by competing directly with the big games, of which we think the most important ones are Matlab and Mathematica. So during the last year, we've been working really hard to improve several aspects of our Python and make it easier to use from the user perspective. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about now. So the first one, and perhaps the most important one, is regarding configuration. Okay. It's regarding configuration. So you have, on the left, you can see a picture of an IPython configuration file, and on the right, a picture of what we offer to the user. So in IPython, you have to edit plain text files, and those plain text files have lots of options, and sometimes it's not easy to find exactly the option that you need. And besides, those options only apply on restart, during application restart, so the user can see its effects immediately, which is very important for an application. Whereas in Spyder, we set the options through our GUI using our preference pane. We have much more fewer options, but we think the most relevant ones for the user. And those options apply on new consoles. So you don't have to restart Spyder to see its effects, to see the option, how the options affect a new console. You just need to start a console. The other thing that we've been working on is making SciPy easier to use. Because right now you have to, well, one of the ways to use SciPy is create a profile called SciPy. Maybe much people don't know about it. And besides, you have to start Qt console or the notebook with that profile. Whereas in Spyder, you just need, or the user just need to select an option called Use Symbolic Math, as can be seen in the graph. And that option will do two things for the user. First, it will load SciPy printing in the background. And second, so the user can see LaTeX from SciPy rendered directly in Qt console. And the other is to load the necessary commands that SciPy needs to start run. The third option, or the third thing that we've been working to is IPython, is connect to external kernels. So to connect to an external kernel, you have to use in IPython the option --existing from the command line, or the magic Qt console, as Fernando showed in the main talk. Whereas in Spyder, we offer the user a Qt dialog, and he just needs to enter in that dialog the kernel ID of the kernel he wants to connect. And besides, we open a new Qt console connected directly to that kernel. So, well, I'm going to forget to do it to show how what's Spyder. So this is Spyder. In the left, you can see that we have an editor, an integrated editor. On the bottom right, there is a Qt console here. And here, you can see an interactive help widget. And I'm going to show you what we can do with it. So we can show docstrines rendered through Sphinx, and besides, doctrines that contain LaTeX can be shown with LaTeX rendered inside that widget. So that's for people that maybe haven't heard or haven't used Spyder before. Well, so that's what with respect to IPython. But Spyder was designed by Pierre to share a lot of features with Matlab, so that users of that program can easily migrate to Python. And I'm going to talk to you about those features now. So the first one, as I showed you, is an integrated editor. So in that editor, you can have grade code completion, or you have the grade code completion using the control space keyboard shortcut. And that completion works on imports too. The editor also flags errors and warnings. It's connected directly to IPython console for evaluation, so you can press F5 or F9 and send your file or a portion of a file directly to Qt console for evaluation. And from the editor, you can have quick access to documentation, to the documentation widget that I show with Control-I, and you can go to the definitions of the functions, methods, classes that the user has imported using mouse left click and the name of the function. Besides, we also have a thing called a variable explorer, or in other programs called a workspace, where the user can see the variables that are defined in his current console, sorry. And as can be seen in the picture on the left, and he can inspect those variables. By giving double click to any variable, a new window opens, and in that window, he can check and edit that variable. So that's the picture on the right. By giving double click to each of those cells, the user can change a value and put the value, a value that he wants. And the variable explorer also has more facilities like plotting, copying, or removing variables. So it's very, very useful. We also have an interactive help widget, as I told you. So I told you that that widget can read docstrings and rendering them in rich text using Sphinx. You can easily copy paste, or the user can easily copy paste docstest from those docstrings either to the editor or to the console, as it can be seen here at the bottom. Well, there is some syntax highlighted docstest, and by pressing this button, the prompts and the output is hidden, and the user can easily copy that code and put it in the editor or in the console. And finally, as I told you too, we can show LaTeX mathematics using Matjax in the background. And finally, we also have great support for debugging. So we have a debug toolbar with the usual debug actions like step over, step in to continue. The user can set breakpoints in the editor, and those breakpoints are connected to the consoles. So a user can run an entire debugging session inside Spyder. No need to go out and start PDB separately. And also the user can check all the current defined breakpoints using what we call a breakpoints widget or breakpoints plugin, as can be seen in the picture on the right. From that widget, he can remove all breakpoints or remove one by one if he wants. Well, but besides being sharing a lot of features with Matlab, being myself a Mathematica user for so many years, I would like also to make Spyder be a little bit closer to Mathematica, because Mathematica has very nice features too. Perhaps the most important one is the notebook. So we have now a great alternative with the IPython notebook, but the IPython notebook runs in a browser, and you can send files to be opened in a browser. So that's kind of a pain right now. But so what we can do to change that or to improve this situation? Well, we can provide a more desktop-friendly of the notebook. As can be seen in the picture, and I'm going to demo later, I developed a new plugin for Spyder that embeds the notebook in Spyder, and it's connected to our other facilities, to our other plugins that we had described. We're just waiting for a thing called multi-directory support to be merged to IPython master, and once that's merged, I will merge my work into Spyder master. We also like to have, because I'm very fond of a documentation center. Mathematica has this thing called documentation center, in which the user not only has the capacity or the ability to search for help, but also it contains tutorials, it contains a lot of things that can help the user a new user to start with the language. So we think to add, for example, important tutorials and intros like the SciPy lectures, which are great. Guides to use Spyder and IPython, because people moving from other languages have some problems at the beginning understanding namespaces or things like that in Python. We also plan to or develop a way to search in docstrings using a library called Whoosh. A couple of years ago, Robert Kern developed a magic for IPython called WhooshDoc, and we tried to take his work and improve on that. And finally, we would like to auto-link to docs.python.org, because reading, the docstrings of the standard library are very short, but the documentation that can be found in docs.python.org, it's very, very good. So instead of having to go to Google and search for something, we can provide inside our object inspector widget or interactive help widget a way to link to those things. Well, so what conclusions I would like to give you about the advantages of a Scientific IDE? So the first one is that in an IDE, you can find all in one place. That's the philosophy. That's why most IDEs are very bloat too. We try to be very lightweight. But the most important thing about finding all in one place is your train of thought is sacred. That's not one phrase, one of my phrases, but from Asa Raskin. He was lead developer of Firefox user interface during Firefox 4, during the release of Firefox 4. And what that means is, that if you are very, very concentrated during problem-solving feature, you don't want to be interrupted. And interruptions are, oh, I have to go to Google to look for that. And when you have to go to your browser, maybe you find your Twitter page opened, and you start to read your tweets. And then you find a link that is very interesting, and you then jump to that link, and then half an hour later, you come back, and you forget, what was I doing? So that's because the people's sense of thought is very, very important, especially for programmers, for people that do this for a living, so that they don't be derailed by distractions and concentrate on what they want to do. But as I was telling, we like to maintain that in a very lightweight environment. So Spyder doesn't take too much time to start, and it runs all these widgets without being blocked. So they are running threads, and everything is very, very smooth inside Spyder. Well, the other thing is to use a friendly app. So for people that come from Matlab, from Mathematica, even from R, sometimes it's hard to start with the language. And it will be better to have a friendly app that requires minimal effort to get started with, and especially that is built for scientists. Because most IDEs are developed for professional developers and have more things that the scientist doesn't need. And finally, to have an easy entry point to use Scientific Python, especially for undergrads. I think right now, Scientific Python is mostly for graduate students or researchers, but it could be extended with things like Spyder to teach Python also to undergrads and for your colleagues. So you don't have to say a colleague, especially on Windows, look, open your terminal, run this, run that, and then use pip to install this or using several things that you can do in the console, but especially in Windows is not the most pleasant experience. And finally, I'm going to give you a very brief demo of the IPython, of our integration with the IPython notebook. So here's the notebook embedded in IPython. Well, we just, for the user, we start the notebook. He doesn't need to type IPython notebook in a terminal. We start it as a daemon, as if we were a server. Then we just render the notebooks inside the Spyder using Qt web widgets, provided by Spyder. Sorry. I have this. Well, and I've been derailed my train of thought like that. Just forget what I was telling. So, well, yeah, we start the notebook in the background. So while Spyder is starting, we start the notebook in the background, and when the application is shown to the user, it loads an untitled notebook for them, so they can start coding inside the notebook right away. Besides, we provide the facility to open an external notebooks inside that widget. So you can see one external notebook here, and that notebook, well, you can do all the things that you can with that notebook. So, well, unfortunately I don't have time, but I don't have more time, but you can, for example, debug that notebook. So we can check what is the PID of this notebook, and it's here. So we can connect the Qt console to that notebook. by passing just the PID. And then we have a notebook here. Look that the prom is 2. So that means that we have run a previous command there, and now we can connect to that and start the debug installation, as I told you before. Well, that's all. Thank you very much. Okay, so if you have any questions, yeah? In your variable explorer, do you show everything in the namespace or do you blacklist? Yeah, the question is if we can show in the variable explorer every kind of variable. Not now, fortunately. We show lists, dictionaries, NumPy arrays, but we don't have support to show everything in the variable explorer. And if the variable is too big, like for example, a big matrix, it can block the variable explorer, but we are working to fix that. Yeah? Yeah, that's a very important question. See, sorry, the question is if keystrokes are configurable. Most of them are, and I'm going. Yeah, you can change them here in keyboard shortcuts. It has a lot of configurability. Yeah, yeah, yes.
What's the current level of support for Python, and are there any plans to support?
Yeah, the question is if we have support for Python, and what's our level of support for Python. Well, we can syntax highlight and show Python files directly in the editor. We don't have a way yet to run Python files in the console, but I think it won't be that hard using the Python magic of IPython, but we don't have support for it right now, unfortunately. We are very few developers. Another question? I have one last one. Yeah.
What's the advantage of embedding the IPython notebook inside of Spyder? So we get a view of a notebook, but what do we get with that?
Yeah, the question is, what's the advantage of having the IPython notebook inside Spyder? So the thing is that the notebook is very cool, but running it inside the browser is not that cool. You know, because it doesn't feel like a desktop app. So you can assign files like I did in my file explorer to open in a browser. That's one thing. The other thing is, currently, with the notebook, you have to go to the directory that you have your notebooks on and start the notebook in that directory. So if you have notebooks in another directory, you have to go to that directory, I mean CD in that directory, and start the notebook there. And if you want to go for another notebook, you have to CD there, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's tiresome, and again, that breaks your train of thought. Yeah. The question is, if I define a variable in the notebook, can be seen in the variable explorer? Of course. Unfortunately, I don't have a monitor, I don't have a projector right now, but yeah, the idea is that, and you can inspect your variables, change your variables in the variable explorer, and be updated in the notebook too. Okay, thank you very much.